It's a beautiful day on Vancouver Island and Vancouver, British Columbia, and we're at episode 169 of the InGoal Radio Podcast, presented by The Hockey Shop and thehockeyshop.com. This week, we look forward to bringing you Kevin's feature interview.
Whoa. That was really well done. But
who's that?
Can we offer a little bit more professional
Darren?
Voice behind that intro?
Oh, please, Darren, step right up.
Hello,
Welcome.
gentlemen.
Welcome back.
Good to see you again.
Welcome back. We missed you, buddy.
I've had the best nap of my life for the last month. This has been amazing. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank God you're
all
here.
The listeners and everybody for rolling along in the Stanley Cup playoffs on InGoal Radio, the podcast. What's up, boys?
What's up with you? I think we've had a lot of people asking that question, Darren, and we said throughout it wasn't really our story to tell. We'd wait till you got back, and I got to say, we are happy to see you back. You look a lot prettier now than the pictures you sent us by text message shortly after the accident. The scars are healing nicely.
Scars have healed. Stitches are out. Some scabs are growing over. The memory is still a little foggy at times, but just remember, wear your helmet when you're on your bike, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. Scars and all. But no, it's all good. I want to thank all the health professionals and everybody around the hockey world for checking in on me. You guys have been so amazing. But yeah, it was a road bike accident. Don't know exactly what happened because kind of blanked out a little bit, but we're on the road to recovery here, fellas, and good things are ahead of us.
So you give us a pretty hard time about the danglers and not wearing the danglers.
Yes.
We did chirp you a little bit while you weren't on the air, wondering if you had a dangler hanging underneath that helmet, and also wondering if after years and years of chirping me for the need to be bubble wrapped, do we need to get you a giant sort of bubble wrap type tissue for the next time you're on the bike?
Well, we're all familiar with road bike helmets. I'm thinking of adopting the motocross
Might have
helmet
been a good idea.
with the full shield in front, with some goggles and gloves and knee pads and all that kind of stuff. So mountain bike motocross is probably the next thing. If I'm going to get out of the house again, which is it's up in the air right now with the family. That will be more the case. The face would have done really well with a football helmet or something like that.
A little tough in the Las Vegas sun.
One word for you, Darren. Peloton.
Yes, exactly. That is the next thing that was brought up to me. I'm not sure we were home from the hospital yet, and the Peloton was brought up, and it was seconded by a bunch of different people. But hey. All of a sudden, it's just like that. We're approaching the middle of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you guys have been awesome, and I can't wait to catch up on everything that you guys have done on the air. But we are at a stage where things are happening, and we, as we go through this, have had now Carolina, Boston, Pittsburgh, Nashville, Washington, Los Angeles. That's 6 teams, and now a 7th team as we record this. Have used multiple goaltenders due to Darcy Kemper leaving the game against the Colorado Avalanche and the Nashville Predators. This is extraordinary attrition in the goaltending position.
Yeah, and some of it, like, let's be honest, some of this is just bad luck. Like, some of this is just fluky injuries, right? Like, even the Penguins, as much as Casey DeSmith's an injury in play, like Tristan Jarry's broken foot. Like, how many times do you see a goaltender break a foot? Doesn't happen very often. Obviously, the Darcy Kemper one is pretty rare, but this one's going to get talked about. And for those that haven't seen it, it literally just happened as we were sitting down to record. Ryan Johansson's stick blade goes right through the cat eye of Darcy Kemper. I don't think, maybe it's knowing him a little bit, but just watching the play, I don't think it was intentional. I don't think he had any idea his stick was in there. He's tied up with the guy in front, goes right through the cat eye. And Darcy looked to be in some distress. There's no update yet. He's obviously not back in the game, but scary moment. And I gotta be honest with you, like, this is a conversation that I've had with people around the league dating back to Sidney Crosby's blade going through the cat eye and into the eye of Rick DiPietro. So obviously we're talking about a fair amount of time has passed. I can't remember how many years ago, but it's been a while since Rick's played. He's now doing ESPN broadcasts. So, a fair while back was the first time it came to my attention that there are people in the league that have a problem with the fact a stick blade will fit through the hole in a cat eye cage. And every time I bring this up, and like I said, like, I'm not pulling this out of my butt, there are people in the NHL that think this should change. Every time I bring it up, I get hammered by the goalie union, and it's clearly been a non-starter from the goalie union. And I'd be curious to see, depending on, and we hope that Darcy Kemper's just got a scare and everything's all right. But I've always said it's just going to take one significant injury, and this conversation will be brought to the front burner, whether the goalie union likes it or not, especially now that visors are mandatory, other than for those who have been grandfathered in. Like at the time, the argument was, you can't tell us what to wear. In terms of eye protection, the players weren't wearing visors, but that's out the window now as well. So again, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just telling you, there are people in the league that for a long time have felt this is a problem and that something like this was inevitable. I hope this isn't the one that changes everything, because that means it's a significant injury, but it will at the very least bring this conversation back to the forefront.
Just to make sure everybody's aware, in the Canadian Hockey League, the traditional cat eye is not permitted, but in NCAA college, it is, right?
Correct. And really nowhere in Canada is the cat eye permitted, to my knowledge. I mean, I know a lot of us beer leaguers are able to wear it, but no.
You can't purchase one in Canada.
Yeah, technically they're illegal to sell in Canada, and that's not a hockey regulation. That's a Health Canada regulation, is my understanding. Isn't that right, Woody?
Yeah, and they should, in theory, be illegal to import, but it's not hard to get it shipped to you across the border, frankly. I don't think that it's something that's watched that vigorously, and yet I do know that our friends at the hockey shop, because there is a government office near them, every once in a while would get a visit from somebody from Health Canada to take a check and see if there were any cat eyes on the shelf down there in the goalie department, Goalie Utopia at the hockey shop.
What is the reason for wearing a cat eye? Is it the mirror test because it looks fantastic? I subscribe to that part, certainly. But is it such an amazing advantage visually? Can somebody answer that debate?
I think it's an amazing advantage visually. Every goaltender I've spoken to, and I've spoken to quite a few young ones who, get at that point in their career where they're able to make a switch, whether it's that first pro camp, for example, coming out of major junior, and they're able to put one on. I've let my own son wear one in the summer when he's going to sessions that don't involve any sort of net front play where there is a risk like we saw in the game today. Everybody I've spoken to has said that it's a remarkable difference in vision, and they would never do anything else regardless. For me, it's 100% the eye test, because it's beer league. Let's be honest.
Yeah, you want to look good,
which is ridiculous, because I couldn't look good no matter what I put on, but it still matters to me. So
you really think it's the eye test? Like, to me, like having worn it.
Oh, I think the mirror test is a big part of this.
I've never considered it. I just, like, to me, looking through bars versus having nothing between me and the puck vision wise, as much as I know it's stupid and I'm running risks. Like, I just find the visions that much better.
No, that's what I was saying, Woody. I'm just saying it shouldn't really be as big a deal for me with what I'm doing. The better goaltenders I speak to, 100%, that's what it is.
Really?
No,
I've
like
never
the vision.
thought of it that
I'm
way.
agreeing with you.
Oh, see, when Darren's saying eye test, I think what he means is the cool look, right, Darren? As opposed to the vision.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's 50-50.
Everybody's sitting in on a classic Woody Hutch conversation where both of us probably agree on something, and it sounds like we're arguing about it because we don't understand each other.
Yeah, you're saying the same thing. You're just saying it differently. Like when you talk about rec league, men's league, like there's no reason why the eye test should looking good should impact that, but it does. But when it comes to just looking at the puck, like there's not a discernible advantage in men's league. But that's the eye test, trying to feel good. In pro guys, it's all about being able to track 100%. The puck better because you don't have that bar in front of you.
And the margin for error at that level of play is so little that you're going to take every possible advantage you can so that you can play better. I would argue maybe the margin for error about stick safety in beer league is probably, a lot more of a risk, right? Like guys, there's a lot of guys around you that don't know what the heck they're doing with their sticks. So, but I do find it interesting that between the two countries, we have this difference that you go down and play NCAA and suddenly it's okay. And
well, how about NCAA? You have to wear a cage when you play as a skater, but you're allowed to wear the cat eye as a goaltender.
No kidding.
But in CHL, you can wear a visor as a skater, but you can't wear the traditional cat eye as a goaltender. That's bizarre.
We have neck guard differences between the countries too. Not all areas. I know some U.S. associations mandate them, but
this will be fascinating to see the fallout from this. And we're in the immediate moments after Darcy Kemper's incident against the Nashville Predators. So I don't want to jump to any conclusions on that part, but the conversation is taking place right now on this podcast and will be furthered regardless of the severity of the injury. Woody.
Yeah, and like I said, I've had NHL goalies say this is an absolute non-starter, don't talk about it every time it comes up. But again, I've had people on the NHL side that have expressed concerns with this, like I said, dating back. It's got to be like, 7-8 years now? So for sure, this is behind the scenes a topic of conversation. And as I've said many times, all it's going to take is one really bad injury before it gets brought to the forefront. I really hope this isn't the time. But maybe the fact it's this scary means it should be time to have the conversation regardless of the output. And goalies will hate me
half the teams
for saying it too.
Half the teams in the National Hockey League have used multiple goaltenders, including the Colorado Avalanche. Most of them have been starting, switching up starters so far in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Nashville, Pittsburgh, and Carolina have all used their third string goaltender in this Stanley Cup postseason. It's been phenomenal how deep teams have gone already.
Hey, and to tie in like third goalies and multiple goalies and equipment, I got to go back because I can't remember how much we talked about this. But an update on Peter Kochetkov's. I still can't say that bloody last name. I'm going to have to call Paul Schoenfelder and ask him how to properly pronounce it. The Michelin glove, the Russian glove that disappeared after he was called up. He's been in true pads and a true blocker, and all of a sudden he gets called up to Carolina and he's in a true glove. And I thought, I wonder, because I had been told that Michelin glove he was wearing in the AHL had not been officially approved by the NHL, and technically probably shouldn't have been wearing it in the A. And all of a sudden he goes to the NHL and he's in practice with a true glove. And so color me surprised when I was told that. And the next thing I know, he gets into games and he's wearing the Michelin with the logo blacked out. Now in the playoffs, he's wearing the Michelin. So I got to the bottom of it. The reason he had the true glove in practice, they did have to physically ship the Michelin glove to the NHL offices to have it measured and approved. And in the words of the person doing the measuring and approval this time, the stinkiest approval process he's ever gone through, because that thing is well used. But yeah, it did go through the offices, got Kay Whitmore's signature on it. It is official and approved. But poor Peter, his must have been wondering, who doesn't speak much English, when he arrived in the NHL, where the hell his glove went, because it just disappeared on him for 2 or 3 days to get officially approved. So that he could wear it in the National Hockey League. So the initial reporting we had on it, because it's one of those curious things, right? Like I was kind of curious. And so I checked and I was told that it had not been approved. And so he wouldn't be able to wear it in the NHL. Well, a week later, he's wearing it in the NHL and I'm going, what the hell? Well, now it has been approved, but they actually had to physically ship that stinky, bloody glove to the offices in Toronto, get it approved and shipped back to him.
If you were with us a few episodes ago when we were talking about baking gloves and then rebaking them after a while, and you put that in your oven, and we kind of walked you through that process. Didn't advise it, but told you the method. You've experienced that aroma of having a glove in the oven. Now,
speaking of this, you've been sort of stuck at home and unable to play, and you told us that you rebaked your glove.
I did.
And so how did you protect from the aroma, Darren? Because like I'm thinking time in the hospital.
Oh, no. There was no protection.
Like
it was full
and
aroma.
You're still married.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're pushing the lines there, buddy.
Well, I just said I forgot that we weren't allowed to do that, and I got away with it. I think I've got another 6 weeks left of that excuse right now of being able to say I just forgot. Half the league has used multiple goaltenders. But a shout out to those that have stayed the course with guys and have like Marc-Andre Fleury lost game 1, came back. They stayed with him. Billy Husso, Dallas has used one goaltender, and Mike Smith Mike Smith, with the gaff in game one, has come back and he's got a lead in this series. So while there's all this change going on, good on the coaches who have stayed the course.
Not only does Mike Smith have a lead in the series, I think he's got the all-time record for playoff save percentage right now at like career 932. Now, not a lot of games, frankly, in that sample over a long career, but there was a lot of talk in Edmonton about sit him out after the puck handling gaff, go to Mikko Koskinen, which is absurd. Mike Smith was the player of the month in April. This was never a question. He's found his game. He looks like the guy of last season. And yes, every once in a while, he tries to do too much with the puck, and it cost them. And he admitted afterwards that that was an instance where he needed to make a safe play. But as he told us in our 4-part puck handling series on the ice with Mike Smith providing tips, what was the first part, Hutch?
The first part was that you have to have the courage to make plays, and you're never going to be a great puck handler unless you're prepared to make mistakes. It was full on permission to the two young goaltenders he was working with to get out there and play the puck. And I would also say it was an appeal to coaches of younger goaltenders to allow that to happen as well, because it's the only way they'll develop.
Well, and that's and it goes back to a story that I think he's told actually since the puck handling gaff, that when you handle it as much as he does, there's going to be mistakes. And it goes back to the first game. He made a turnover with the Dallas Stars and then was scared to get out of his net the next time the puck was rimmed in. And by the time they got to the first TV timeout, and he tells this story in the video that we have up at InGoalMag.com on the 4-part series, first TV timeout, he goes to the bench, and Marty Turco, who's among the best ever to do it, says to him, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, I made that mistake. I didn't want to go back out. He said, no. I never want to see that again. If you can handle it, go handle it. And so an important lesson early in his career, and one that he shared with us and shared with others. And like you said, Hutch, an important lesson. Every bloody coach wants a good puck handling goaltender. And yet as soon as they make a mistake, they scare them into shutting down. I shouldn't say they all do it, but many do. And so you have to encourage them to get out there and do it again, just like Mike Smith does. And he's after that rough first game, he's looked incredible the last couple.
The band is back together. It's InGoal Radio, the podcast. Aaron Millard, along with David Hutchison and Kevin Woodley, presented by The Hockey Shop. The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. We are happy to bring you the Sense Arena VR feature interview in just a little bit with Kirk McLean coming up. And we also have our gear segment in a couple of moments. But first, Carey Price did return for the final little bit of the National Hockey League season. Woody, do you have an update on what the aspirations are or projections are for Carey Price moving forward?
To be honest, not beyond what he said publicly. We haven't reached out privately or anything like that. But certainly a lot of us in the hockey world were happy to see him back. And then, sad to hear him say after that game that there's swelling on his knee on a pretty consistent basis every time he plays. And if that continues, he's not sure he'll be able to keep playing. And so that put a bit of a damper, especially after that. It was nice to see him get that win. I thought he played well in some of the losses, but to get that win to close out the season, and a lot of happy moments that you saw behind the scenes, his kids along the glass. And, he talked about that day and going into it and his approach and how it was just a great day. And there was undertones there that made you worry that it, talking like a realization that, if the knee doesn't get better, it might be the last one. Right. And, none of us in the goalie world want to see that. There's only one Carey Price, and we want to see him in the league. So hoping for the best, and that that knee continues to heal and gets better over the summer, so that we get more moments and more great saves from Carey Price for a long time yet. But certainly a bit of a damper and a bit of a grain of salt to hear him talking in those terms after such a nice night, and yet at the same time, also refreshing to hear how at peace he seemed with everything. So, because that's all that matters at the end of the day. Selfishly, as a fan of goaltending, I want to see Carey Price. But truthfully, as somebody who's gotten to know him, not well, but a little bit through some of our interactions and some of the behind the scenes stuff, you just want him to be able to live his best life and enjoy his life and enjoy his family and all those other things. Like Carey Price, the person, as we said from the start of the season on, matters more than Carey Price, the goaltender. But the rest of us still love to watch Carey Price, the goaltender, and hope we get to more in the future.
Hutch, your heart must be fully involved in this.
I just hope desperately that Carey comes back and that we get to see him again. He's been been a fixture for all of us for a very long time. We know how much the game means to him and how much he means to goaltenders everywhere. How many guys have we interviewed on the podcast And part of that is about their origin story. And we asked them all, who was your guy growing up? Who did you follow? And almost to a man, we hear Carey Price was the person that people followed, and it's far too young for him to be done. I agree with Woody. It's good to see that he's at peace. It's good to see that there was some moments there of closure in a sense, with his young family in that last game, so that maybe he is able to leave on his own terms if he has to. But yeah, absolutely. I hope for the best. I'm glad he got into that and maybe can do the rehab that's needed over the summer, and let's hope his body's good to him and allows him to return for next season.
This is InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by The Hockey Shop, The Hockey Shop source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. If people want to get in touch with us, how do they do so as we enter into the real stretch drive of the Stanley Cup playoffs and get into a rhythm here in the first round?
Yeah, well, there's lots of ways to get in touch with us, Darren. I used to just pull out the old podcast at ingoalmag.com, but I've really enjoyed that we get lots of questions over on YouTube now. Every video that we post gets quite a few different comments and questions thrown in there. We get emails directly to info@ingoalmag.com. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can get us, and we look forward to chatting with people. I got one in this week, actually, a question that might be worth just knocking around here, Darren.
Was it from me? Did you get my question? Like, how do I get back on the podcast?
Well, you just jump in like you did. Woody wasn't supposed to send you the link.
I can always count on Woody for a distracted.
Well, it's just old habits, hey? Old habits. Yeah. I was having a whole lot of fun. No, we did get a question from Meryl Coral. I hope I got your name right there, Meryl, from Pennsylvania, and says some great things about the podcast, and says that they're getting a lot of their personal development just from listening to the podcast, and it's always great when people let us know that. But basically, the question was, we've dropped the comment on here a number of times, probably all of us, that shinny can be a bad thing for goaltenders. We talk about summer hockey and getting together with your buddies and just playing a little bit of 3-on-3, 4-on-4, whatever it might be, as your summer training. And we're quick to say that can create some bad habits, might not be the best thing. And, and the question comes in just saying, look, I found it's the only thing I can do. We're hearing from a beer leaguer here. And I think that it's really helped me, especially when I think of the things that I've learned on the podcast. So asking, could we elaborate on a future podcast a bit about what they might be misunderstanding, or really what is it that we mean when we say that shinny can be a bad thing for goaltenders? So what do you think, boys?
I get the question, because it's like strength training, like practice a looser environment. And when you get back to a real tight situation, a more organized hockey, you should be better. I get that way of thinking. So
yeah.
Woody, answer why it can be a disadvantage.
Well, I think the context, like for the listener that sent the question, it's probably not I fully believe that he gets something out of it, especially if it's his only opportunity to go out and skate. The comments we make are more sort of, for NHLers, for NHL goalies, and based on feedback that we've had from them over the past number of years, because there used to be a lot of guys that would just go out and play shinny. Now, this isn't shinny like you and I go play at the local rink on Tuesdays where half the guys can't skate and half of them don't bother to skate into their own end. This is like shinny, unstructured NHLers. And so if you give NHLers an unstructured environment with time and space, it quickly becomes a tic-tac-toe fest with backdoor central. And again, nothing wrong with that. Like if you can hold your edges and work on your patience and try and play everything straight up as much as you can, then it's not a problem. Or if you only play it every once in a while, it's not a problem. But if you spend a good chunk of July or all of August doing little else but shinny at that level, the goalies in the NHL will tell you, you hit points in that environment where your only chance to make some of the saves is to cheat. Is to cheat your read, is to anticipate a pass earlier, just because of the skill level and the amount of time and space they have. And the reality is, if you do it often enough, it becomes a habit, and it becomes something where you can get caught leaning when you're trying to go back into a regular environment. So that, to answer the question, when we make that statement, it's more the NHL level and for those guys. And it's not, we don't pull it out of our ass. It comes from conversations with NHLers who have gone both ways on this. Now look at Martin Jones. Like Martin Jones started playing shinny more in the summers earlier in his career because he felt like he'd become too technical as a goaltender, and he wanted to, work on going outside the box and the desperation saves and getting outside of his technique a little bit. Like there's a time and place for it. But again, if you have to cheat to make saves and you start cheating often enough and you do it for a month at a time heading into your season, sometimes those habits can be a little hard to delete or get out of your game once the season starts. At least that's what we hear from other NHL goaltenders.
So from a professional point of view, Hutch, like 80-20 would be okay, 90-10 would be okay. Where are we on the balance there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't actually know how you would ever put a balance together, Darren.
Yeah.
What it would be, and I don't think it applies just to the NHL. I think it probably applies more as you move up the levels in hockey. I have a few thoughts on it. One is there's a lot of players, even at the junior hockey level and above. I've spoken to pros. All they really want to do in the summer is go to skates with other guys and basically play shinny. Yeah, maybe a bit of skill development, and then they play what is effectively shinny. That's not really good enough if you're trying to take your skill to the next level, whether you're a player, a goaltender, whatever. You have to be doing position-specific skill training, I believe, if you want to be able to elevate your game going into the next season. It's more than just. I absolutely agree with Woody about the habits that can be ingrained, but I also think back to that statement we've heard from Mitch Korn before. Goaltending is about pattern recognition, and the patterns that you're recognizing in a shinny skate are not those that you're going to be seeing in a game. So, yeah, great for exploring your athleticism, great for learning other things. I really believe that you also can't live strictly on goaltending skill sessions. If all you do is one-on-one sessions with a goaltending coach all year long, you can't just step into a game and play at your highest possible level. You need the game experience. You also need to learn to, as Kevin was saying about Martin Jones, sort of go outside your technique. And so there are things like that, or maybe you're on a regular hockey team and your coach does a little bit of the small area games that have become so popular. I think those are really valuable for goaltenders as well to explore your athleticism. But as I said, I think as you move up higher and higher levels, that proper game level pattern recognition and how you play are so important. And I talk about my son way too much, but he had a really neat experience this year in that he started playing under 18 hockey, and then he moved up to junior A for some games, and then he got some game experience at the major junior level this year. And he says, absolutely, without a doubt, the game gets easier as you move up. He found it easier to play to an extent at the major junior level because you know what's happening in front of you. You can trust what's happening in front of you. Yes, of course, the releases are better. The shots are harder. The stakes are higher. But just learning to play that game is a very different experience than playing at a lower level. And so you need to have that experience and to see those things happening. And if you just play shinny, if things are loose and unstructured, you don't learn to trust the system that you're in as a goaltender at a higher level. And for him, learning to know that his defense would have a certain position on the ice covered so that he could fully embrace a shot that's coming towards him, fully honor the shot that's coming towards him in a way that you simply can't in shinny or at a lower level of hockey is just incredibly important. So, yeah, I think if you're a beer leaguer, go to shinny because that's probably all you're seeing in front of you anyway. Let's face it, right? So you are learning the same pattern recognition you need to live with for the most part. And there's nothing wrong with it for a little bit as you're moving up. But absolutely, if you want to play the game at the highest level, if you want to improve your game to the next level, you need to work with a goaltending coach and you need to play in a structured system a fair bit as well.
And I will say, like, a part of these conversations with NHL guys over the years, like when I started this job 20 years ago, like it was a lot of shinny in the summers, but you've seen the evolution of those summer skates. Now they have skills coaches on the ice and it looks more like an NHL practice. It's still not always great for the goaltenders because not all practices are, but it looks more like a formal practice for a period of time. And then they usually scrimmage at the end, and that's when you get into the shinny environment. We talked about Carey Price and being a guy that so many looked up to. Kerry plays a ton of this. That's what he does in the summer. The skate in Kelowna that he goes to has evolved from pure shinny, pure scrimmage to, again, like a lot of skates for pros now, there is some structure at the beginning. They hire a coach to come out and run a practice type environment, but then they go into, just a scrimmage. And he plays a lot of that in the summer. And last I checked, he was still, the best goalie in the world, or at least viewed in that vein, and seen in that regard. So it works for him. It's a matter of sort of finding that balance and maybe not doing too much of one or the other. Same with goalie specific training. I remember the conversations with Carter Hutton. If the environment is never dynamic, if you always know where the puck is getting passed to next, and hey, some of that's on goalie coaches for not creating dynamic drills, but if you always know A to B to C and then a shot, that's not realistic either. So I think you're right, Hutch. You have to find some balance there. And sometimes that depends on what level you are at. Sometimes that depends on where your game's at. Marty Jones, prime example, right? Where he was at and what he needed. He altered what he was doing based on it.
Variation. That's what I'm getting out of this. You have to find your own balance and your own ratio in that. But variation is a pretty intricate, important part of this.
And how you handle the different types, right? Like this is just like a bad practice in the NHL. Like how many goalies have we talked to? Like, oh God, like we have these endless rush drills and guys winding up from the hash marks. You have to find ways. Like if you just go out and play shinny all the time, like you have to find ways to work on certain things, just like you would in a bad practice.
Yeah, I think the variety is important, and I think it has to be tailored to the individual, Darren. Carey Price can go out and play all the shinny he wants in the summer, because when he gets back on an NHL sheet, it's like riding a bike. Like he's done it so much for so many years. That's all ingrained, and he's going to be absolutely fine. If you're trying to make that leap, though, maybe it isn't such a great thing for you to be doing. Who are you as a goaltender, as a person, and what is it that you're trying to accomplish going forward? I really believe, as I've said before, that training needs to be periodized, in the sense that you go with segments of your training throughout the calendar year in different cycles, depending on the development that's required at the time. So maybe, as it is, I think, for a lot of goaltenders, the summer is for skill development, and you can really focus on some of that one-on-one time with a goaltending coach. Then you need a period where you can ingrain that into your game so that you're able to apply it on the ice when you get into a game. So that evolves your training a little bit more. So I think it's something we'll never have a perfect answer to. And I think the important thing is that whenever you're doing any training, you recognize that there's advantages and disadvantages, and you take it all with a grain of salt and incorporate it as you need to.
This makes me wonder why we don't address listener questions more. If people want their question or their query addressed, how do we go about doing that and helping them out?
For the most part, if it's like this, guys, podcast at InGoalMag.com. But today's came through to info@ingoalmag.com,
Awesome.
Probably through the website, or maybe even my own address. And then if you're on some of our social media asking questions, you're probably going to get a more immediate, although briefer answer.
Brevity is overrated, right, Woody?
Yes, I concur. For the first time, I'm going to be brief in my answer. Screw you two.
I thought you were going to be the ultimate
You could have
brief.
said yes.
Like Todd McClellan brief after
do-
game 3 when he did his post game. I thought that was what we were expecting.
The only guy
That
I
was-
know that's got a 3-paragraph yes, Woody.
Good on you.
You guys should see me order Starbucks.
Oh, I have.
That's not a drink. That's a paragraph.
They just read it off. They don't have to give the name. They just read it off, and then you go, okay, that's me. They don't even have to get your name right or wrong. Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com, bring you InGoal Radio, the podcast. Our gear segment this week, dealing with the Brian's G-Netik X5 gloves and pads. This is available, obviously, on this podcast as well as on our YouTube page. And you've got a good one here, Woody.
Yeah, we're getting into the second price point stuff from Brian's. Obviously, Brian's G-Netik line launched. The G-Netik 5 line launched back in the fall. We talked about it then. As we come into the spring, Brian's doesn't launch their pro-level gear in the spring like other companies. Like I said, it's in the fall. But they do have a launch coming with the second price point gear. And I got to say, this is one that we're paying more attention to now here at InGoal Mag and InGoalMag.com and in our segments with the Hockey Shop, in the gear segments that you can find on Instagram, TV, YouTube, as you mentioned. Please go, hammer that subscribe and like button in both spots. And I think it's important because the reality is, as much as we focus on the expensive stuff, for a lot of goalies, whether it's young goalies or beer league goalies, this is the price point that works for them. And we continue to see improvements in this price point, both in performance and quality. And I think you're going to see that here in this Brian's X5 product as we go over it with Cam. Just, another company that understands that they need to find that balance between, a good quality product without pro level pricing. Again, whether it's for beer leaguers or for young kids, and I think Brian's has struck a nice balance here. And, Cam will give us more details in this week's gear segment. Welcome back to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports. We're down here in Goalie Utopia with Cam Matwiv, and it is that time of year when we have new gear coming in. We've focused a lot on the pro end stuff, but we never want to forget the second price point. And we've got a new one here from Brian's that bang for buck and value. I'm looking at some of the features that trickle down from their pro, which you have there.
Correct.
I've got the G-Netik X5 here. This is the next price point down. Let's start with what you are getting, and let's include what you aren't getting, because obviously there's a reason it's significantly cheaper. But how's that going? Who it's for? How's that going to manifest itself? Give me the big differences between the G-Netik X5 and a G-Netik 5 Pro.
All right, Brian's continues to produce their high-end quality offshore equipment manufactured in the Philippines.
If I'm not mistaken, it's at they've developed some ties with the Rawlings factory, which helps, especially on the glove end, because you got people that are working on this product that have been making gloves for one of the biggest baseball glove factories in the world for
Correct.
a long time. So nice, easy transference.
So transfer the overall pad. So one of the better changes I think this year, Brian's done a better job at differentiating their two offshore lines with truly having a softer flex pad. Before, the two cores of the pads were kind of very, very similar. It's finally started to separate itself with having the Optic and the Optic X2, which is still a current model and out on the wall. But with the Brian's, the G-Netik series in particular, again, a little bit more of that flexibility. Something just in terms of overall feel on the leg, you get a bit more of that connectivity to it in that sense. You still do get their Primo slide surface, something that we've checked out on InGoal and at the Hockey Shop and reviewed them all before. Aiding in that slidability of the pad, also it has a durability feature too as well. That Primo
one of the better
does.
ones. I think one of the better surfaces we've seen in terms of combination of durability and just you can tell the difference between this and their old sort of stock material. This slides better.
Yep. So moving on to the back side of the pad, it still continues with their strapping system, which we have become familiar with. So that's a refinement of that original smart strap. So now the two strapping systems themselves are identical now between the Optic X2 and these guys. The shin of the pad itself has been raised just a little bit more. Nice, soft, supple, comfy feel on the inside of the pad. Still aiding in that comfortability of that pad, but also in that overall feel and connectivity.
Well, and which you obviously in a more flexible pad, having a little bit more connection. That to me that matches hand in glove. Pardon the pun.
Hand in glove. Wow, I can't believe you used that
Speaking
one
of
before.
pro features, we're back to our friend. I like the adjustable smart strap.
There we go. So
go screw, Matt. With
that same bungee system that you see on their pro pads, again, trickles down to their offshore series. Easy system to do up, works well, available aftermarket. Same smart boot strap as well, adjustable on the inside of the pocket. In most cases, though, a lot of guys are just removing this and getting rid of it. So personal preference does kind of come into play there a little bit.
And easy to do,
yes.
Easy to remove. We've talked about it before, but we do like the fact that you can actually create a gap before your elastic toe tie. One of our favorite things and why we recommend it as an aftermarket option here at thehockeyshop.com.
I do like to call out just the actual thickness of the core of the pad itself. Like the pad's still lightweight, don't get me wrong, But in terms of the foam that they're using, because it's a little bit thicker and it's a little bit stronger, this pad doesn't wear down as fast as some of the other models that are out there in a mid-level. So I find that even like after a full season of use, Brian's offshore equipment still holds up and sits up pretty well. In comparison to the Pro Pad now, in terms of for that overall flex, one thing you will notice, like this doesn't have their Bri-Core carbon material, calling out the core in particular. So, that is one of the major differences between, going up to that higher end domestic Pro Pad versus this offshore. However, when you start to look at the two, once again, we're not too far off, which is a nice call out, a nice feature, and it's an excellent price point available for you.
A little softer on the flex, also a little softer, it feels like, down the inside edge than the stiffness of this.
Correct.
Just again, like a soft, flexible pad. If that's what you're in the market for, in some ways, this is probably a little softer and more flexible than even the Pro Pad.
Correct. Stock off the wall, but obviously because you can order custom, you can change that up at any time.
Of course.
So,
gloves.
Okay, gloves. So, still, refinement in terms of the glove itself, closer to the actual Pro glove in terms of overall feel and stock fitment off the wall. You don't get the BOA system on the offshore, so kind of key important feature that you will find in the Pro. So if that's your deal, you like that.
And if you haven't used the BOA system before, man, it locks your hand in so beautifully. We're big fans.
However, if that doesn't matter to you and you're looking for a bit of a friendlier price point, that's where that G-Netik 5X glove comes in. X5, there we go. Bit of a tongue twister. Overall feel right off the shelf. Again, to me, not too far off. I mean, a little bit break-in required, but that's with any glove. Again, I actually like the feel of this. This feels, eerily reminiscent of a Pro glove from, a couple years past. So you can really see those advancements that offshore, equipment has taken.
X5 blocker.
Yes. Once again, no BOA, no Bri-Core, so important call out between the two as well. So yeah, rebounds are going to be a little bit hotter off this. This is a stiffer board. This is also a bit heavier because of that Bri-Core as well. So something that's not featured on that G-Netik 5 overall 5X. However, in terms of performability and feel-wise.
Performability?
Yes. It's still the blockiest blocker that ever blocked.
You can't have two blockiest blockers that ever blocked. That was last week.
Well, this one can be the blockiest blocker that ever blocked too.
Blockhead. All right. That's the Brian's G-Netik X5. Price point. We mentioned it's lower. How much lower? What are we talking about here? I know you haven't, these are just coming out fresh stock. Maybe you haven't even determined that. I'm going to test you here.
So here's the best part. You can check them out live at thehockeyshop.com. We'll leave you on another cliffhanger.
Man.
Sliding away.
Brian's G-Netik X5. It's amazing when you talk about this gear, and this is the second price point, Hutch, and it's better than the top of the line gear 1-2 years ago. Like, that's how fast it's evolving, even though it's the second price point.
Isn't it incredible? Like what goaltenders have available to them today. Of course, it's an expensive position to play, but the companies are giving you some options that make it so much better. If you need something a little bit more affordable, you and I would have absolutely killed to be able to wear this gear in 1984, wouldn't we?
Yes.
I actually, I've said it almost in jest, but I mean it in seriousness. 6-year-olds have safer gear than we had in the 80s.
Like forget the 80s, boys. Forget 84. Try 2014. Like in the last 3 or 4 years, the amount of improvements in this second price point and the amount of work that's going into
remarkable.
them
it's remarkable.
It should be applauded, and not just Brian's. We've talked about CCM. We talked about Bauer in particular. Like some of the pro level features that they have on their second price point product is remarkable. It's good for the game. It's good for the game. There's still that pressure, just like having the $300 stick. There's still that pressure at the high levels to play in pro gear. But what we've seen, and we've seen this, we've put kids out at bantam ages and high level bantam in second price point gear, and they've gotten more than a season out of it. So this stuff works, especially the pads. I would say that's the one thing. You get a little more padding in the gloves, a little more maybe protection in the gloves at the pro level, but the senior pads, maybe a little less durability, but we've seen some lower price points go like 2 years at a really high level play where guys are on the ice like 5 times a week.
You're nodding, Hutch.
Well, that Bauer set that we got that Kevin's referring to being used in high-level bantam, my son used it in first-year bantam, and that is now 3.5 seasons ago. His goalie partner this year at U18 AAA wore that same set all season long. He wore it for some BCHL appearances as well. A fantastic young goaltender. And that gear still looks almost out of the box, quite honestly. It's going so well.
I also did a little Yaroslav Halak on my Axis pads and gloves while I was out. So
Darren with a little time on his hands, eh?
Yeah. I've been itching to get back. I've been waiting for Woody to make the mistake and send me the link by accident and get me back on here. I did do some of that cleaning things up. Hey, if I won't ask Woody this because one, he started the position later than us, even though he's better than us. But
better than us, dude. You're the only one playing against NHL shooters. Nice try.
Bingo.
I don't touch a lot of pucks, as I told somebody the other day.
Then you wouldn't
really
need to clean them, but you're
them.
cleaning them, Darren. I think you're better than you say.
What's the bruise that bothered you the most? Was it the blood blister or the blood vessel in your palm when you catch a puck wrong? The shoulders, the thighs when you get a puck on the inside of the pants? What was one that bothered you the most?
For me, it was no question. It was the palm, because the arms, man, did they hurt when we had not much more than those quilted pads, but you could avoid getting hit in the arms. But the hands were what we used for safety. You get a hand on every puck if you possibly can. And once you get that really bad sort of bruise stinger in your palm, you're getting another one and another one and another one. I won't drop any names here because it was told to me in confidence, but I learned recently about an NHL goaltender who spent most of the season last year with that, even in today's gear. Yeah. So to think.
I would use the practice palm all the time if I could.
No kidding.
Like for sure. Going back, just flashbacks of being minor bantam or minor midget. That scares me to go practice palm all day long.
All day.
Although the thigh bruises, those hurt, and the shoulder bruises, those hurt too. Woody, you have no idea what we're talking about. And I that's a good thing for you, but you were spoiled.
Woody lost his appendix to a shot. He's got reasons.
That's true. I did lose my appendix. I did. That's a poorly fitting, not well tucked in chest protector that cost me my appendix. But so I guess I can relate a little bit. The near death experience, thanks to my wife, not thinking it was serious, locking me in a room and going into septic shock in that room because she was worried I had the flu and didn't want the kids getting exposed. So sorry for telling that story publicly, hon. But honestly, like my first chest protector was a Reebok Premier One, like the P1 model. That thing was bulletproof. Like, so I hear these stories and see these, sort of like glorified felt, like arms on the stuff you guys are talking about. I've never, and that's the other thing too. Like, I think because like your generation that grew up in bruises, like the fear factor was a part of goaltending and the bruises were a part of it. You guys are like ones that are all like still wear like when I first started 20 years ago, like the Vaughn chest protectors, it was like they came with bruises. I'm like, why would anyone ever wear that? Like I started in a Reebok Premier, and I've never gone back because I don't think it should hurt to play goal. Like every once in a while, sure, but like the amount that sort of guys in those models, especially again, not the same now, but even 5-6 years ago, where they'd show me their arms and they're all bruised, and I'm like, why? Like, why? I don't get it.
I was thinking, okay, there's, all the cool YouTubers do collabs. The two accounts get together, they do something together so they can promote each other's channel. There's a fantastic Twitter account that we've mentioned on here before, Cooper Goalie, puts together incredible tribute sets from all sorts of different old school goalies of different generations. He's got a whole garage full of gear to put these tribute sets together. I think we need a collab with Cooper Goalie where we can take Woody and dress him up in the old school gear and let him find out what it's really like, Darren.
I will be there. You tell me the time, I will be there.
With a camera crew.
With a camera crew and my hired shooter.
I won't. Yeah, Darren's bringing in Eichel. Just tickle him in the ribs a little bit there, Jack.
I mean, this guy plays wearing a fiberglass mask if it fits the tribute. I just love what he does.
It's amazing. One of the best sets of all time. belonged to Bob Essenza with Winnipeg Jets. Same era was Kirk McLean, and he is our feature interview this week on the Hockey Shop, the hockeyshop.com, source for Sports Surrey, in InGoal Radio, the podcast. Kirk, it's been a long time coming, but that set with the Vancouver Canucks in those vintage years and those high watermark years, Woody, spectacular.
Yeah, 100%. And, it's funny because, he's been around the team as an ambassador for a while now. He's been back in Vancouver and obviously still an immensely popular figure here in this town. But that, I think it was 2 years ago, the 50th anniversary, the night where a bunch of the alumni came out, and when he skated out in that, tribute set, it wasn't the original set, and I'll save the interview to let him explain, but tribute set that looked just like what he wore back in his heyday in the early 90s with the Canucks. Man, like there was an emotional, visceral response. Like Kirk generates some of that in this market anyways, but to seeing him in that gear, like it was iconic, and just the way people reacted to it was like, it was special, and you could feel it in the building. And so cool to catch up with him. Not just about that, but about like how the position has evolved. He was kind of seen as one of the last stand-up goaltenders. Interesting to make some points about never being injured playing that style, as others around him went to the butterfly and groins and knees, never had an injury, never had a groin injury. So lots of cool little details and things, that you can there are lessons here that you can probably apply even if you're a kid or even if you're playing today, even if the style wasn't the same in terms of mental strength and some of the other things that helped him have the career he had.
Sensorina VR, bringing us our feature interview. Hutch?
They sure are, as they do every week. And one of the things I love about Sensorina, as you guys know, is the fact that they're continually updating the interface, the drills that are available, the different tools that are available in Sensorina to help you train as a goaltender. This week, they've added something new that's not really right in the system itself, guys, and that's a new app that you can get. And if you download the Sensorina app now, you've got access to all your stats as you're working within the system. There's new content getting updated, they say every day, with tips for your training on and off the ice. You can get access to all the different training plans that they have for goaltenders. It's really your tool to access your training, both for Sensorina and outside Sensorina, to help you become a better goaltender. And that's just another tool that they've released. And as we've talked about before, there's just so many things in there to help you become a better goaltender. And there's no better time than right now to get into Sensorina. And that's because it's summertime, as we talked about, focused training so that you can step up to the next level this fall when you hit the ice again. We've all got some extra time right now. All you need is 20 minutes a day, maybe 3-4 times a week, and you will be a better goaltender with the help of Sensorina, all the different tools they have. So check out the app on the App Store, check out Sensorina, and if you want to get into it and find out all about it, when you purchase your Sensorina, use the code IGM50 and you'll get a further discount. Thanks to us here at InGoal and our great relationship with Sensorina. And we thank them, as always, for their support.
Amazing. Approaching the 200th episode, and there's an app for everything, including getting Kirk McLean on via Sensorina VR. This is outstanding. The feature interview on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
Really pleased to welcome to the InGoal Radio podcast, Kirk McLean, legend, National Hockey League legend, Vancouver Canucks especially legend. I can't believe in my home city that it's taken me this long to get you on the InGoal Radio podcast, Kirk. 16 years in the NHL, 11 here in Vancouver, a whole bunch of highlights I want to get to throughout your career. But what you may not have known after all these times, and you've helped me with interviews and quotes over the years, but I was there in 94 in Calgary, pre-journalism career, as a fan, drove there with a bunch of buddies to watch that 2-pad stack save to send it to overtime. Yeah, university. Okay. So I'm a little older. How you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's been, like you said, it's a long time coming.
Yeah.
I only see you every game.
Yeah, about time I had you on the podcast. So a whole bunch of things I wanted to get into throughout your career. but you played in a different era.
Yeah.
I want to talk about equipment, styles, and all those things that evolved while you were playing. But first off, let's just go back to the beginning. How'd you become a goaltender? I always love the origin stories for guys. It's usually one of a couple of things, gear or being a little brother. What was yours?
Well, it was neither. I just kind of fell into the position. I was a fan of a couple goalies at the time. But I really started as a player. And it was a full year of like a hockey academy or a hockey school where you're learning the game, playing not all the positions because they didn't have any goalies in the school, so you're learning defense, center, wing, and all that kind of jazz, and the rules of the game and what have you. And there was always a goalie school that would come on after it. It was called the Scarborough Lions Hockey School at Birchmount Arena in Scarborough, Ontario. And this hockey school our goalie school came on afterwards. And I was, it was a time in the 70s when the paint jobs on the masks were coming in. So that was maybe a little bit, I was attracted to that because, when you played ball hockey or street hockey, you would get those street hockey masks and paint them up all the different colors. And then the one particular instructor, he had the puck machine, which I think he was he's head of the game at that point, and he had the brush cut, so he looked like a drill sergeant. And for some reason, I was taken to it, and I would bug my father afterwards to watch these goalies. And as my hockey career went on, the next year, I play in house league hockey as a left winger. For a full year, at whatever, 6 years old. And then the following year in house league hockey again, I fell into the goaltending position halfway through the year where we didn't have a goalie, hands up, and myself and another player split the second half of the season. And I actually made the All-Star game for the house league All-Star game in a half a season. So I did well at it and stuck with it. I enjoyed it, and like I said, had that success at that time. And then from I guess it would have been Adam up on. I became full-time goalie. I worked my way up through the ranks of travel teams. I started in the SHA, which was the Scarborough Hockey Association, for the Agincourt Lions. Couple years there, and then into the MTHL, but the A division with Don Valley Villagers, and then made the big jump to the MTHL major, the Don Mills Flyers in Pee Wee hockey.
So what was it like at that? Because you said with goalie school, right? Like
Yeah.
I think we think from your era, we think, they didn't have goalie coaches
Yeah.
back then, and
Well,
yet
they didn't really. I mean, that's I went through my whole minor career until maybe my second year midget, where I finally had I wouldn't even call him a coach. He was an advisor, and of all people, the name was Dean Dorsey. I don't know if you remember the name Dean Dorsey. He's more known for his place kicking ability, NFL, CFL, University of Toronto. But he did play 2 years in Sault Ste. Marie in goal before he decided to pack in his hockey career and became a place kicker and punter in football, and made a long career in CFL and NFL. So I got a year and a bit with him as kind of the goalie consultant.
So what was it? And you get into, like you said, Don Mills Flyers in the MTHL, and then onto the Oshawa Generals in the OHL.
Yeah.
There is some coaching. It's not like what we know today. But what was like? Were you also largely self-taught? Like, how did you
Oshawa,
learn?
that's where I fell into my real first goalie coach, but it wasn't full time. It was an ex general legend. Ian Young was his name, and if you're a goalie geek, you're gonna know who he is, because he played with Bobby Orr in Oshawa, the times when they were the farm club of Boston at the time. His career was cut short with a Mickey Redmond shot in the eye. So he didn't lose the eye, but it blinded him pretty much about 95%. So that kind of ended his career. No masks, obviously, back in those
Different
days.
day,
right?
different era.
So he did go to Boston's camp with trying to do it with one eye, and just found different certain situations where he just couldn't do it, and ended up packing in at some point, and went back to school and became an accountant with RBC. But he would come in after work, because we'd always have practices after school and what have you. And to this day we stay in contact. He's one of my best friends, and we share the same philosophies and always have. And he tutored even through my pro career. When I first started here in Vancouver, I had nothing in New Jersey. But when I got here in Vancouver, Cesar Maniego was somebody that would come in once in a while, because he was off busy doing his own businesses. And then I got lucky, after Glennie Hanlon packed it in. He came on as a part-time, but quickly became an assistant coach. So he was there all the time. But that's not saying he did my goalie coaching all the time. He was very good at monitoring myself or whoever else was there. If we needed the work, we would do it. And he was just starting to get into the video part of it. But he knew I hated video, so he didn't bring me in for too much video. But yeah, that's the way it was, and I'm okay with that. I think, in our era, a lot different now, but in our era, I think a goaltender may have not wanted the guy around all the time. There was somebody there obviously to lean on and ask questions and talk to if you felt you were having a tough time, and obviously give you some advice and maybe give you some drills to get through some of the bad habits that were creeping into your game.
What were some of the focal points? Because I think it is a bit of a misnomer. The game has become so, I don't want to say overtaught, the goaltending
100%
position.
100% overtaught.
Okay, so there we go. I'll let you say it.
Yeah.
But we definitely see that, right?
Yeah.
Like, from 7, 8, so technical the way the goaltending. What was it like then? What kind of things were you focused on? Were you guys
stopping the puck?
Yeah.
And as a kid, I patterned my game after Jacques Plante and Bernie Perrant. So that's how I played. I'd watch them on TV and I would try and emulate them on the ice. And even the coaches back then, it was all about your angles and standing up. It's like anything else. They're going to read their books or what they needed to do to pass their levels to coach in minor hockey. And that's how you developed. Most of the time, it was the one goalie system. We didn't carry two goalies very often, and if we did, we'd alternate, all the time. That was just part of being fair, I guess, back then. And then if you got into certain playoff games or playoff series and tournaments, the coach would have to make a decision then. But that's how I did it. There was really no videos. There was a few books out there, but nothing high tech. And I guess went with whatever talent I had and stuck with it until I had a proper goaltender that could advise me on things that I needed to work on or things that I didn't could get better at.
1 year with Oshawa, then drafted by the New Jersey Devils. Again, what's a draft like for you back then? Like, again, we're pre-internet. Like, did you attend? Like, what?
I did attend.
Okay.
Actually, back then, goaltenders on average didn't get drafted till 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round. It was very rare that a goalie would be drafted in the higher rounds. It started to creep in a little bit, probably in the early 90s, I guess. Maybe late 80s, early 90s. With New Jersey, I can remember vividly. The draft was in Montreal, the old Forum. My dad came with my minor hockey coach, and at that time I had an agent. We were introduced to Rick Kern and Bill Waters at the time were together and in midget hockey, and then so I had him through junior hockey and signed my first contract and the rest of my career with Rick. But that was new to us. But being there, having to sit through, I drafted in the 6th round, so it was a long day. You get a little down. Craig Billington had been drafted in the 2nd round. I think he was He was first pick in the second round or something. He was high, anyways, because Craig was the premier goaltender coming out of junior hockey. He'd been Canada's junior goalie for 3 years in a row, and had a really good career with the Belleville Bulls, and then being drafted that high when New Jersey actually went up and played almost a full season as an 18-year-old, and then was sent back down, which happened a lot in those years. It happened to John McLean, the same thing with New Jersey. Happened to Joe Sorella, the same thing with New Jersey. A player that I also played with in Oshawa, Todd Charlesworth. It happened to him with Pittsburgh. It wasn't uncommon for a high draft pick to be called up the first year and play the whole year and then get sent back down to junior.
We couldn't imagine that now, right?
No.
Well, I don't think you can.
I don't think you can. The rules I'm sure have changed, but yeah, I'm in there with the Montreal with some other friends that were in the Rick Curran, Bill Waters stable, and we had a good time in Montreal. Well, my mom not my mom, she didn't go, but my dad and my minor hockey coach Ed Robichaud, they had fun themselves.
I was going to say 107th overall. Nowadays, that'd be like high 4th round.
Yeah, well, 32 teams.
Right, big difference.
Yeah, big difference.
So first couple years with New Jersey, what was that process like? What do you remember about turning pro? Was the adjustment?
Great. They were great to me. We had a stable full of goaltenders by the time I got to my first year pro. So we had Billington, myself, Sean Burke, Chris Terreri.
Some big names of that time.
Alain Chevier was the goalie at the time. He was the sacrificial lamb. They threw him to the wolves for 2 or 3 years there after. Our first camps when Chico Resch was still playing, Ron Lowe was still playing, Bob Sauvé was still playing. And then Carl Friesen, who was out of Winnipeg, Hanu Kampuri, a Finnish goaltender, Sammy Saint Laurent was there. He came in from the Detroit Adirondack and Detroit organization. So at the end of the day, it didn't take a rocket science to figure out one of us was going to move. You have some commodity there where you can make some moves, and which they did, and eventually got their goaltender in Martin Brodeur, right? So
heard of him.
So it worked out. Their 2 cups or whatever they got there, and Sean had a couple good years with New Jersey before he moved on, and Chris Terreri, mainly as a backup, and Craig, and then Craig went on to have a successful NHL career. He didn't quite get to the starting level, but he did at the beginning at least, and then fell into a nice position, especially in Colorado where he finished.
You get traded to Vancouver and acquired by Pat Quinn, the legendary Pat Quinn. What was that adjustment like? What was that relationship like? Like, it feels like, and I don't know if this is just Pat, but looking at it now, and obviously I come from a lens of, back then I was a fan. I was a kid. I wasn't covering it like now, but it feels like the relationships were a bigger part of it back then, especially management to players.
Totally. It wasn't that big of a deal coming to Vancouver because I was going into my second full year of pro. I played most of my first year pro down with Portland, Maine, and the farm club, and then through the season, because we had Terreri, myself, and Billington, we rotated up through the year. So we'd get a couple months each up with the big club. Alain Chevier, like I said, was the starting goaltender. Played my first games, by the way, at 19. After my last year junior, we got beat out. So that's where I got my first win. And those are good stories too. But getting traded here, knew nothing about Vancouver. I'd been as far as Calgary in the Max Midget tournament. Pro-wise, never really left the Eastern time zone, and the only thing I really knew is I had Greg Adams coming with me, telling me what to expect, and other than the fact that my dad would listen to Foster Hewitt at 10 at night when the Leafs were out here in Vancouver. That's pretty much all what I knew about it, but was certainly pleasantly surprised when we landed at night and then woke up in the morning at the old Sheraton Villa, which is now a casino. hop on the bus to go to Duncan for my first training camp here in Vancouver.
Well, 11 seasons here, and you're back here. I should have mentioned it off the top. An ambassador with the franchise, still actively involved with the alumni here. So obviously, the city left an impression. Sounds like it created an immediate impression.
Totally. You know, I fell completely in love with the city. Did a lot of it have to do with whatever success I had? I'm sure it did, you know, and being here for the better part of 11 years, you set your roots down pretty good, and you're networking and your friends outside of hockey that you make, it becomes your life. You know, I still have tons of high school friends and junior high school friends back in Ontario that I stay in contact with and get back there as much as I can to visit them and have a little bit of fun, you know, and my parents were, they're passed now, but my parents were back there. So obviously wanted to get back to see them. My sister's back there with the rest of my nieces and great nephews and nieces and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, this became home, and I can, you know, I can say I've lived here longer than I grew up in Ontario. Yeah, I grew up in Ontario, in Toronto area, but lived here longer through my adult.
We know you as fans as Captain Kirk. How did that nickname start? I'm curious.
Well, I think it, you know, to do with the Star Trek character. That's how it got labeled, and you know, that's a good one to have, I guess. It could be something different that you don't want to be labeled with, but I'm okay with that. And you know, later in my career, you know, getting into the Calgary playoffs when you know, Jim Houston's you know, his old saying, great save, whoever it may be, McLean or great save, Bird or whatever, you know, that's kind of, in some parts of my life, other friendships, they've labeled me with great save or save as my other nickname, but I'll take either or.
I would take great. I would, especially if they do it with the Jim Houston voice, because there's nothing better than Jim Houston's great save, McLean. 94, obviously the run that I talked about going to Calgary, and that was a special group. Talk to me about Pat Quinn as someone who brought you in as a general manager, but then also became your coach, and what made that relationship special. And like I said, maybe a little bit different than what we see now. There seems to be a separation between player and coaches and management.
Pat brought us, you know, myself and Greg, and obviously we were his first trade when he got here as president GM, and you know, the connection there was because of Brian Burke and Bob McCammon. You know, Brian at the time was a player agent, finished his career and finished his schooling at Harvard, and was starting a new career in the player agent business. And Bob McCammon, being, you know, the legendary hockey mind that he was scouting at the time, I believe, with Edmonton, had a place in Portland, Maine. Actually, Steve Tajura, who was our captain, lived in his place, and my roommate at the time was Dave Anderson, Glenn Anderson's brother. So Brian obviously saw me a lot, and KG being a pro scout saw me a lot. So I really truly believe they were very instrumental in the trade, because I was kind of the throw-in, if you will. Greg had already established himself as a scoring winger for 2 years or so with New Jersey, and I was kind of like the throw-in young goaltender. You know, whether I was going to make an impact right away or they could put me into Fredericton for a few years to develop, but they gave me a chance right off the bat. You know, I landed here, and the King was still the guy. You know, he was near the end, but he was still the guy, and Frank Caprice was here. Wendell Young had just left, and we went with the 3 goalie system there for a while, and Frank got sent down, and then it was Richard and I, and then at the trading deadline my first year is when Pat moved Richard to Hartford, and Steve Weeks came in, and I think at the end of the day that was probably nothing against Richard or anything like that, but that for me it was probably the best thing for my development, because Weeksy was coming in not really to challenge me for the number one job, but to tutor me. he was an amazing professional, and I really learned a lot from him.
Is that something like, as your career went on, like that mentorship component? We see different relationships. Even today, you'll see different relationships between two goalies at different stages. How important is that?
Oh, I think it's very important. And, Weeksy was near the end of his career as well. So we played 2 years together, but he really did show me how I was just, still wet behind the ears, a little, I don't want to say out of shape, but a little on the baby fat side still. And he was in phenomenal shape and super hard worker, just positivity coming out of his ears and his nose, anything. And I would, just by watching him, what he did, before practice, after practice, to make sure his game was on top of the way he wanted it. I don't want to say it was a little lazy at the beginning. Some people may say that.
Well, so we hear that all the time, even today. Like, what it takes to be a pro is not. Usually takes a little time to learn that for a lot of guys.
It does, and you're semi-given the number one job right off the bat as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old. Even when I came here, when we had the 3 goalies, I still got in 43 games or so my first year. So that's pretty darn good. And I'm thinking maybe then big time Charlie. I've made it, and
this is easy.
And this is easy, yeah, exactly. But it's not the case, and watching Weeksy, what he did, and and maybe a little bit of a talking to after year one from Bob McCammon. I came back next year and lost a ton of weight, in good shape, and went with it from there.
Style.
Mm-hmm.
We always I think I've seen you referred to as at one point the last of the stand-ups. Right. You're playing the way you grew up playing at a time when that transition had sort of started, obviously with Patrick. Mm-hmm. And then I think I started learning about the position in the early 2000s. So towards the end of your career. Yeah. And that's where, butterfly mechanics and this sort of modern evolution really took off.
Right.
What was it like for you, sort of being in between, like having your style and knowing that it works and worked really well for you? But as you watched others sort of transition around you, were there conversations? Did you have playing partners that were adopting some of the newer stuff? What was that like back then?
Not really, because
everybody's still doing it.
Everybody was, I had Kay Whitmore for 5 years, the two of us together, and we played similar styles. We same philosophies and
Walk me through a couple of, when you say philosophy, because I think there's going to be a
just
generation.
Angles,
angles and positioning.
Cutting the angles down, out of your crease, backing in as the play comes with you.
A little retreat.
Giving yourself to be able to move laterally so you're not flat-footed.
A little
flow to your game and making saves like a 2-pad slide. That was part of our arsenal.
You guys practiced that.
Exactly. We were taught that as a kid. A desperation move, don't get me wrong, but that's what it was there for, to get across as fast as you could. If we could get across in a half butterfly or on our feet, more power to us, right? But, in certain plays where you just couldn't do that, you threw your body across, and that most often did the job. But players pick up on that quick too, right? And the game was starting to get faster. Even when I played with Artie Urbe, there's a guy that butterfly and move laterally, but you never knew if he was butterflying or if he was standing up, because he was crouched so well, and he was such a great athlete and so strong on his feet. It looked like he was butterflying, but I think most of the time he was standing up. And then at the end, when I was in New York, Mike Richter, stand-up goaltender, couldn't butterfly worth a lick. He'd go down on a butterfly and there was no butterfly. He'd be just down on 2 knees.
Right.
So again, there's a guy that we shared pretty much the same philosophy of cutting the angles down, standing up as much as you could. He was extremely strong on his feet as well, especially laterally, and could get across quick, but did come into a lot of injuries, especially later, lunging maybe a little bit too much because he didn't have a lot of flow as the play was backing in. Sometimes it bothers me the amount of injuries that goaltender's gonna, touch wood. I never pulled a groin, never pulled a hamstring.
Never.
Wow. Not once.
That's remarkable.
And never really stretched. I would you come out for warm ups and stuff like that. You know, I'd go down on the ice and pretend I was stretching, or put one leg up on the boards and make it look good for the crowd and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't really stretching. You know, I don't know. You could say I was naturally limber to a point, but
do you look like, when you see the injuries now? I mean, I think we're going to hit 120 goalies in the league this year. Like, the butterfly's not a natural part of the human body.
No, it's not. But you know, the size of the guys now. And, you know, the game is obviously most of it played down low, so they want the goalies in the butterfly and the 6'4" plus goaltenders because they cover more than that up top. Mind you, they're getting beat a lot more now. That's the theory. That's the analytics, if you will, which is another thing I do not like. But they're amazing athletes now. I mean, but they're being taught that as kids at a young age, and they're making these moves at a young age, and their muscles haven't even developed yet. So they're getting hurt in midget hockey.
Yeah.
Prior to even going to college or junior hockey.
We're hearing hip surgeries at 11 and 12.
It's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Major surgeries at that age. You know, and you wonder why that you know, they're taking a while to break into the league as far as a number one goaltender. Like, not very often do you see a number one goaltender coming in at 22, 21, 22. Usually in the 24, basically in the peak of their career. So they're coming in and they're going to hit it right off the bat until they get to
not a lot of lead up,
30, 40. There's not a lot of lead up. So, you know, it bothers me. It bothers me to that point. You know, the way that the drills and the movement of the goaltenders, it's fun to watch because there's no damn way I'd be able to do it. You know, just looking at it hurts me, but it's just incredible the way they can move side to side in their butterfly position. Mind you, the equipment's different now.
But I wanted to ask you about that too.
The equipment, the pads are made for that. The skates are made for that. And, you know, I'd beg to differ. A goalie in today putting on pads that I wore to be able to do that. I bet you they couldn't do it.
Well, no, I mean, we've seen, you know, the landing gear when it was first invented, and the idea of a pad that, like, I remember Mitch Korn once telling me when he used to scout that he looked for, he called it contortionability. And he's like, I don't even look for that anymore because as soon as they drop, the pad does it for them.
Dominic Hasek, Buffalo, talking about a contortionist, but he did it with knee rolls and everything.
Yeah. The pads were so tight. And they moved with your leg.
Yeah.
They didn't rotate around it back then.
Now I mean, I can't believe how loose the pads are on the goaltenders. I wouldn't be able to move. It would feel so weird. Like, it would feel so weird making a move and like you got to flip your pad back because it's not in the right position. I hate that. That would drive me nuts.
Well, if you get them set up right with the new ones, they do rotate back automatically. We got elastics everywhere now, Velcro, no more leather straps, and they probably weigh about a quarter of as.
Yeah, but the skate alone now, you know, there's no cowling or nothing. It's you know, it's almost like a player skate, and you know, the blade is still obviously a little bit longer and flatter, but with the naked eye, if you're just looking at it,
you wouldn't even know. What changed for you, like? Maybe not personally, but through your time from an equipment standpoint. Like, I remember I've had this conversation with Sean Burke,
right?
Who, you know, similar era. Yeah. Do you remember, or maybe it didn't, but was there a point where the fear factor started to disappear? Like, you would have grown up in an era where it hurt to be a goalie.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember when it started to change, or did it just never go away?
Never changed. And that's probably because I never changed my body armor. Anything. I wore it for pretty much my whole career until the end when I was backing up and I was practicing a lot more and taking a lot more shots. So I forced myself to get a new set of body armor and double up my jock, if you will. You know, taking too many of those through practices, but that was the only time, you know, when I had enough. You know, as far as getting pucks in the shoulder and whatever.
So that was part of
I used to cut stuff out of my equipment because I wanted to feel the puck. I wanted to know where the rebounds were. You know, you watch the modern day guy and, you know, everything, they can't feel anything. I'm sure they do, but there's so many times where
I try my best not to feel anything. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, but you know, there's so many times where they try to swallow the puck, but the puck's to the right or to the left, and they think they have the puck.
Yeah,
because they don't know where it is.
Yeah, they can't feel it.
They can't feel it. And I wanted to know where the rebound went, you know, if it didn't go in the net or if I didn't absorb it. But I just had caps on my shoulders. Like, well, you look at old photos of it looks like I got nothing on. You know, I wore.
You're like the example that everyone now likes to show and say, "Hey, this is what we need to get back to."
Well, exactly. And I had, like a first baseman's glove, basically as a glove. I could pull my glove right out of the box and wear it, no problem. And it would break down. I had to go through probably 2 gloves in a month because they'd break down so fast. Blocker I could wear all season. All I do is just change the palm. Pads probably twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. But right out of the box, I could probably use the pads. I have to say, I do appreciate what the goalies do with equipment. With all the different theme games, and they're changing the colors of their pads and their gloves and their masks, and not just the fact getting used to that, but the superstition part of it. For me, if I'm on a winning streak, the last thing I want to do is put on a different set of gear. I'm going to say, screw you. This stuff feels too good right now. My game's too good. I don't want to put something that's going to make me feel odd. But the guys do it now, and bless their hearts. They have fun with it, and it's great for, obviously, for the game, selling the game, and for the fans, but there's no way in hell I would do that.
Well, I want to get to one of the tribute sets that we saw here in Vancouver. Unfortunately, we won't see it tonight because he's injured in Thatcher Demko. But first off, you mentioned superstitions. Yeah. Did you have a few? What were
I had a few.
Fine line between routine and superstition.
Yeah, more routine. Minus away from the game. The superstition would be more if you're on a winning streak. You drive the same route,
right?
Maybe the same tie or something like that. Park in the same stall, that kind of thing. But it was more of a routine. Get dressed left to right. I never liked having a water bottle on my net when you were allowed to. It wasn't even at the beginning. It wasn't even part of it.
Hold on. When you started in the NHL, there were no water bottles and they obviously didn't have the Gatorade loop in the back.
Then it was just put the water on the top, and then once in a while somebody
you didn't want that.
No, I didn't want that. I didn't like it. I didn't like.
Is hydration an issue? Like, it's hot out there.
It maybe became a superstition, but I would do it. I'd get my drinks and when I a delayed penalty or something, or TV timeout, that type of thing. Even in between periods, I'd have like 1 cup of water. That would be it. I don't know. I just didn't. I felt it waterlogged me down if I drank too much.
Down.
Yeah, because the early years when we had the leather pads, they were waterlogged, and then when the synthetic stuff started to come in, the early years they still got waterlogged pretty good because they hadn't. They
weren't foam. They were still stuffed.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't want to overdo it, but it's. Some players, and let alone goaltenders, have major superstitions.
Now, I want to talk about that gear, because the gear that you wore in '94 sort of became iconic here in this city. And 2 moments: one, the 50th anniversary when you skated out in that gear, or in a replica version of that gear. And just walk me through, what are your memories of that? There was such a visceral reaction from this fan base, and the connection. Obviously, the connection is to you, Kirk, but I think they also connected to that. It became iconic.
Well, the colors of the gear and the jersey itself, and it was unbelievable, is what it was, and it was. I have to say, I was a little nervous when they told me this is what they wanted us to do, because one, I hadn't played goal since the day I retired.
You still play, but always out.
Always out. 2, I had no gear. So that was all replica except for the mask and the stick. 3, I hadn't skated on goalie skates in 20 years.
Now, did you find, I know about the equipment because I helped facilitate sort of finding the replica set, but did you end up in modern goalie skates, like cowlingless, or did you find something?
They were cowls. They were Dan Kluche's old skates.
Okay.
So
probably old Cohos or Reeboks, I'm guessing.
They were Bauer. They're actually Bauer.
Oh, they were Bauer. Okay.
Yeah. And which I used. But the boot was a little different. I had a stiff boot, a high boot. These ones had like the little soft areas in the back and no support really at the end of the day. So I'm out the night before taking a spin around with these things, getting used to back to a flat blade and a different boot. And then I slowly put on the pads.
Because the pads, that
Yeah.
knee stack, if you never played with a knee stack, even though it's a
Yeah.
replica, look, that
Yeah.
knee stack for a skating goalie,
Yeah.
if you're not used to it, you can sort of,
So
it crosses over and hits.
just walking out into the ice with those things on, it was like I had to open my legs so far apart. It was like, this feels really weird. And then on the ice trying to skate, it was like, this is ridiculous. And I used to use 34-inch pads. Now 34-inch pads now aren't the same as 34-inch pads back then. 34-inch pads now are more like 37 inches, 36, 37 inches. And so they were pretty high on me. So that was another thing to get used to. So having said that, I'm out there the night before. The band or whoever else they're rehearsing, and I'm skating around doing figure eights, trying to get used to everything. And I said to my wife, I go, I got to do this again in the morning. This isn't going to be
You're nervous
enough.
about it.
I'm a little nervous. That's
20,000 people.
It's
I'd
a
be
long
nervous.
skate. It's a long skate from behind the net to the blue line. And so the next morning after pregame skate, same thing. I got to put the gear back on and go out just half a gear just to go out there and make sure I get my feel and
Those were lessons about being a pro that you learned early on.
Exactly. And then I found out that Steamer did the same thing.
I didn't know that.
He went out and skated in the morning, and Dennis Kearns, who hadn't skated a while, did the night before as well. He started with a walker.
Really?
Just to get his balance. It's been
a
that long, yeah.
Yeah.
And then so everybody, that same thing goes through their mind. Nobody wants to embarrass themselves, right? It's an important moment.
It's a big celebration for the franchise. The place is packed.
Yeah.
Everybody's celebrating.
Yeah.
I mean, it brought chills. Frankly, as a guy who grew up as a fan of you in that
brought
gear.
chills down my mind. Then you get out there and it's just like, okay, shit, I want to play. and I'm standing beside Steamer, and I think it was who was it? Stetcher that was beside me, and he's like, this is, using profanity. He says, this is effing awesome, right? He's in the moment, and Steamer and I are sitting there, we're going, I want to play. And he goes, I want to play too. And I said, what if after the national anthem we just stand here? You go take the face off.
Go to center, I'll go to the net.
We'll get Bird on one side, and Dennis will be on defense. We'll set it up a whole line. It would have been cool if the league allowed us to do that just for a photo op.
Just to take the face off like that.
Just not even with an opposition, just to stand there and get an above shot. That would have been so cool. But even turning around to come skate off the ice, you still got to concentrate to get off, right? And it's just like, then you get off and it's like, whew, we did it. And it was a big smile. It was a wonderful time. And like I said, that's the only time I've been back in goalie gear since I retired. I'll only do it one other time. And, I say that now, but is if we get a heritage game or if we're involved in a heritage game, and if they ask me to play a period or whatever,
for an alumni,
that
was the only downside of when we had the quote unquote outdoor game at BC Places there because of the ice concerns.
And Ottawa, Ottawa, I don't know what kind of alumni base they had. I don't even know what the issue was, but if we are lucky enough to be slotted into other than the Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary, Edmonton every single time, or Toronto, Detroit, or whatever you want to do. Mind you, I'd have to train for about 6 months. So I may be calling you. You may be doing.
We got some guys that can help
Clarkie.
you. And there's a set of gear downstairs that would just look perfect on you. Take a little adjusting to get used to, but it might be a little taller than you're used to. But what did it mean to you when you saw Thatcher? And I know he reached out to see him wearing a gear. I know it's not the same brand, but just to have that look.
CCM did a wonderful job. He texted me in the summer and asked if I'd be okay because they're going to do this theme night and a replica night, and I said, "Damn straight, man, that'd be awesome." And what a classy guy and a classy thing to do to even consider, texting me and asking me if it would be okay for him to do that. And boy, he pulled it off, and CCM pulled it off. It freaked me out when I saw him in the full gear. I saw him, wearing the gloves here and there, but when he came out that the
mask,
mask, everything, was just bang on, and right to the stick, the wood grain stick, and they, a few pictures that you saw on social media side by each, you couldn't really tell that he was 4 inches taller than me, but it was
He made a couple old school saves too.
He did, and even kind of stacked the pads once, and it was just a great night. And of course, the team came out and just had an awesome night, and against a rival of me back in the day, and it couldn't have been a better night. And I was proud of him, obviously, and proud of the team.
I know we got to wrap this up because you got to go, but I wanted to ask you: is there guys that you like watching today? Like, I know the style's different, everything's different, but who do you love to watch?
They're all good. I love watching Thatcher. I'm a big fan. I love his demeanor. I love his positional play, and that he's a student of the game. He always wants to learn, and he's always getting better. Vasilevsky, and I like watching him as well. I was in the alumni box the other night, and Glennie Hanlon was up there, and we looked at each other, and he goes, "Damn, they're all good now, aren't they?" And it really is. I mean, even the backups are fantastic, and they're such great athletes, and they really are good. The game is so fast now. The pucks, everybody can shoot the puck. It's not, you don't have to worry about, 2 or 3 guys per team. It's like every single puck carrier or puck shooter that, first line, fourth line, they can all do damage.
We do see the occasional pad stack. I don't know that it's authentic. When you is there anyone that's still stacking? Like you guys used to practice it.
Yeah.
Do we need to have Kirk McLean's pad stacking school for some of these guys? Because it's a little awkward.
I don't think so. But I do truly believe that the game's gonna revolve, and there's gonna be a hybrid type of goaltender. I think you're starting to see it a little bit more. The goaltender's starting to stand up a little bit longer than usual.
Patience is a big part of it.
Totally. And when they start to realize that, they're big enough. They're big enough, and it's easy enough for them to get down on the butterfly if they have to. Because guys are now shooting short. I see so many short side goals now, and you'd be thinking, awesome. I mean, bad goal here. Now it's just like, well, that's just analytics. They tell you to shoot there, and if you hold your position and they beat you, they beat you. That was me back in the day, cutting the angle down. If they beat you on the angle, it's a good shot, especially if it goes off the post.
And I also think the shooters have been trained to look for so many specifics within those butterfly mechanics.
Yeah.
Anybody that throws you a different look sometimes, whether it's standing up or holding their skates, or even Flower will go like both, stand straight up at the post with both legs together like you guys used to do. I think in Nabokov, every time I see him do it, Flower made like a dozen of those last year. Just guy coming down the wing, and they're looking for short side high, and he just leans into the post with both legs together.
Yeah.
Like there can be an element of
that's just
surprise.
Experience. That's experience from him, right? And the players are told, the scouting reports and all that, but I don't believe in for a word that when the guys have the puck, that's what they're thinking. They're just thinking, shoot the puck, try and score. They're not, goalie has brown eyes, he's got a weak glove hand. That type of thing. It's like any old time, even back in our day, they had scouting reports on the goaltender. Mine was always between the legs. That seemed to be my Achilles heel. But I'm sure they have he's weak high, or he's weak, weak low right, or whatever it may be, and that'll never change. That's just hockey. There's stuff happens. There's 17 games within one shift. To be able to pull off analytics for that is you're doing something that's way over my head.
It's the goalies that can read all those different elements and figure out those patterns, whether it's your era, the era before you, or the era after you, that are the true difference makers.
Yeah, and you know what? As a goaltender, at the end of the day, it's all about stopping the puck. Who cares how you do it?
We'll finish where we started. It's all about stopping the puck. Kirk McLean. There are so many other stories I want to get into. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about Vessi and Dewar as well, because I know you're a brand ambassador, especially for Vessi. Yeah. And if you live in Vancouver, these shoes are waterproof, and they're the best thing in the world because I live in them when I'm at home.
Yeah, they really are. They're comfortable. They're stylish. You can dress them up, dress them down. And you
can throw them on a suit. I've actually worn it on the bottom of a suit, like the sneaks. They're absolutely
totally, man. And I just mentioned their Chelsea boot for you when you go for your dog walks.
I've got it earmarked. So a lot of stories too that we didn't get a chance to get to. Guys you played with. I guess that just means we'll have to have a part 2. Took me long enough to get part 1, but we'll have you back sometime down the road. Thanks, Kirk.
Okay.
Part 2, Part 3, 4. This is a mini series. Kirk McLean has a mini series written all over him. Like, of our generation, there's not many guys who want to talk, can remember everything, and are so passionate about the position as Kirk McLean. There's guys that love it, but Hutch, that was fascinating.
I loved every minute of it. And it was incredible, as you say, how much he remembers. That's what stuck with me. I started, I always make notes as I'm editing this so I can try and remember something intelligent to say as we're talking here, because I can't remember anything. And there he is listing off every goaltender who was in camp when he first arrived with the New Jersey Devils. And then he follows on with experience after experience. It's just fantastic how he's able to paint that picture for all of us and take us back to that time. And I just love that these moments, whether it's that 50th anniversary celebration or seeing Thatcher Demko in the mock-up set, I just love how it means so much to him. And it's great that he's able to share that with all of us and that excitement that he has, because of course we're all very excited to see him.
I loved watching him play. I couldn't play like that at all, but I loved watching him play.
I drove all the way to Calgary to watch him play a Game 7 in 1994. 5 guys piled into my Volkswagen GTI for that trip. It's actually started with 2 cars and 6 guys. 1 car broke down halfway there, and he had to stay with it. And the remaining 5 of us went to Calgary. Sold that extra ticket. Had a really good time. Yeah, it was a heck of a time. We took the cooler. Didn't leave the cooler in the broken down car.
Wow.
Hope Princeton Highway wasn't even the Coca-Cola back then. Actually, the Coke was open, but we were on the Hope Princeton because we were poor, cheap students that couldn't afford a $20 toll.
You lost more cars on one road trip than Kirk McLean butterflied during that whole series.
Yeah, I'll never forget. There's some of the footage, the save, obviously, and we talked about that, obviously, there about whether these guys actually know how to stack the pads these days. We see, quote unquote, stack the pads in games now, but it's not quite the same. And when Bure scores the double OT winner against Mike Vernon on a pass from Jeff Brown, and they pan around the audience or pan around the crowd there at the Saddle Dome, there is a moment where you can see me and my buddies just whooping it up. We were rewarded for driving all the way to Calgary with a double OT win. I still have the Calgary Sun newspaper and the ticket stub in a frame somewhere here, buried in the office archives from the next morning, waking up somewhat hungover the next morning and buying a newspaper so that I could clip it with my put it in a frame with the ticket stub.
What happened to the 6th buddy?
Probably never spoke to him again.
Yeah, I can't remember how long it was before. Not a lot of room in a Volkswagen GTI. We could have put him on the roof.
Oh, that's awesome. We've got an update on Darcy Kemper, who we started the podcast episode with being injured in Game 3 against the Nashville Predators. 2 things of real interest. The first being all the talk about the cat eye and the stick going through the cage and causing the laceration to Darcy Kemper. But there's a twist on this, Hutch.
Yeah, first there seems to be some indication that he's going to be okay, and this isn't going to be a significant injury, but that's just an initial report. But we're thankful to hear that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more news by the time people are listening to this. Yeah, there's a great image that's available from Andrew Nels at the Tennessean.com, and he captured the moment the stick went in there. And interestingly, it actually goes in that little slot beneath the cat eye opening, Darren. So it's obviously it comes part and parcel with that cage design, but it's not where you might have expected the extra large eye opening. Looks to me like it would be fairly easy to add just one little bar there to prevent a stick blade from going through without impacting your vision. So maybe that's something people will consider. But yeah, most importantly, good to hear so far that things are looking better.
I'm curious to see where we are next week on this conversation about the cat eye cage. The fact that there's 2 openings, you don't really think about that right off the bat for a stick to get through.
Yeah, I'd never considered that.
In that area only adds a little more layer to this conversation, Woody.
Yeah, and again, the best news, Peter Baugh, who covers the Avalanche for the Athletic, in Colorado, reporting there's no concussion, although I don't think we would have expected that. Probably we're worried more about an eye injury, but he has sources saying it's not expected to be serious. So that tells you that as scary as it looked, and anytime something rakes near your eye, you're going to panic a little bit, as Darcy appeared to be doing. But it doesn't sound like there's any serious damage. I won't return to the game, but it doesn't sound like it's long term, and that's good news for Darcy. But I would expect that I'll hear the same things I've been hearing every other time now that I've brought this up and said that there are people in the NHL with concerns, because the injury isn't serious. They'll just say this doesn't happen often enough to worry about it.
Record number of goaltenders appeared in the National Hockey League regular season. We're on that pace right now during the playoffs. Some of it because of coach's decision, and some of it because of this situation involving Darcy Kemper, which again brings up the conversation about equipment. What's going on over at the website, Hutch? We have some news and notes and latest offerings. By the way, I love the Seamus Kotick series. That was awesome, you guys.
Still going. The Finnish Shuffle is our latest little skating warm-up drills. Talk about, our beer leaguers talking to us about how they can work on their game. A lot of these skating drills that we have in here are actually, warm-ups that these guys do. And, to be honest with you could probably incorporate to a certain degree some of them 5 minutes before a game, rather than standing around and letting your teammates, blast pucks off the glass behind you, hit you in the head, or drop you square in the nuts from 5 feet away. You could probably do some of this crease skating and actually get better in those 5 minutes before the puck drops. I might be speaking from experience. They're not naming names. Trevor. If you're listening, Trevor, the only guy that once concussed his own goaltender in the warm-ups for a playoff game.
Sounds like Trevor did all three.
Yeah. He may have gotten me a few. Trevor had a real good moment the other night playing with a stick that was taped up. So clearly he was worried about it being compromised. He taped it down around the bottom of the shaft, and sure enough, it breaks trying to clear the zone on a penalty kill, and we give up what ended up being the game-winning goal because we couldn't get it out. So,
thanks, Trev.
Shout out, Trevor. Just kidding, buddy. I love you. No, it's but you can do the Seamus Kotick series in warm-up, boys. Like, these are simple drills, and that's what I love about it. Like, we've got Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, easy for me to say, doing these as part of his warm-ups with the Buffalo Sabres, the Sabres prospect. So right up to the highest level, these drills are effective, but they can be done by kids. They can be done by adults. Seamus's whole goal in sharing this series with us was to sort of arm, those minor hockey coaches that may not know much about goaltending with, some simple skating drills that will help you become a better goaltender. So I'd highly recommend it. We're up to part 6. We're going to get 7 or 8, and then we've got another series of sort of drills and shooting drills. We add some shooting to it. The next step was Seamus and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So massive thanks to him. And I'm glad you enjoyed it, Darren, because we've been getting a lot of good feedback on it.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff, isn't it, Hutch? Just be able to walk through that, and you can do it at any point. You don't need anything else really other than ice and a couple of pucks, and even that you could probably fudge around.
Yeah, and you can do these things. We first heard about Eric Comrie doing his training at stick and puck sessions in Southern California. I had an experience like that this week, guys.
What?
I had an experience like that this week. Connor Lecouve, who has been a guest on the podcast before, lives not very far from me. And when he played in the Finnish League this year, and in fact was slated to go with his team to play in the Spengler Cup before it got canceled, quite sadly. And Connor does not have, he's visiting his parents up in Qualicum Beach, just north of here, does not have any shooters locally in Qualicum Beach that can go work with him. So he's been going to stick and puck and taking one end and just doing crease movement drills to help himself get better. Add a level to this, Connor went to try out for the new 3-on-3 Pro League. The tryout was in Vegas.
Yeah.
And he prepared himself for his tryout for a professional hockey league, going to stick and puck in Parksville, British Columbia. And so I got to go.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So Maddie and I got to go out on the ice with him last week, and I put him through a few different things, showed him a few things he hadn't seen before. And Maddie got to snipe on him a little bit, and it was a pretty cool experience. So yeah, there's a guy at the highest levels who is taking advantage of what little ice is available, and he's going out there and doing some skating drills to try and become a better goaltender. So what a great series. Absolutely. If you're one of those guys who goes on the ice and just sort of does that little fake groin stretch as you're watching your team warm up, maybe use that time and work on your edges, because some of these drills are pretty basic and some of them are actually a little bit more challenging than they look, I think. So if you try and perfect them, it's fantastic. Lots of other great stuff there too, though, Darren. Of course, we had the extra long overtime game there this week between Pittsburgh and what was it, triple overtime, and I was hoping for it to get up to 100 shots. Everybody hopes for these things to be over, and I think us goalie fans just hope they're going to go on forever. Kevin brought up the interview with J.S. Giguere on the podcast and the fact that he had played a 5 overtime game with an IV left in his arm. So Kevin wrote that up on the website, shared a little bit of what we heard in the podcast. So if you haven't heard it yet, it's a great opportunity to go and hear that little bit. We've got a pro read with Jake Allen, who's always fantastic with his reads and is just very generous with his time and sharing his views. This time about why he read a shot and then a particular location on that shot in a breakaway that he faced. So we talk to all kinds of goaltenders who tell us that they learn so much just by sitting through those pro reads and getting the view of professional goaltenders. So as I've said before, brilliant idea for that series from Woody, and I'm so thankful that we've been able to bring that to people. So InGoalMag.com, everybody, great opportunity to get some of this great content. Head over there, subscribe. It's less than $50 Canadian for a year. Inflation's going through the roof for everybody right now, but the price for InGoalMag.com has not changed since the day we opened the doors. And you can also purchase a gift subscription for the favorite goaltender in your life, and they can get access to a year of content going forward, but also all those archives, like 500 different articles sitting there for you to go and dig into today if you become a member.
Outstanding. Woody, like, what a deal.
100%, especially if you're in America where, like, I mean, that's, I don't even know, what is that, like $30 or $35 because your money's worth so much? Like, it's practically free. It's less than a cup of coffee, on a weekly basis. Like, it's $50 a year. Like, it's $1 a week.
It's half a tank of gas to fill your goaltending tank for a whole year.
Whoa, look at that.
That is well done. Good job. And
I did
people
that math
can send
in
their
my
questions
head.
to us too.
What's that?
People can send us their questions.
They can send us our questions. Podcast@InGoalMag.com.
You don't even need a subscription to that. Just be a follower of the podcast.
You like the podcast? All you got to do is tell us how much you love the podcast, and then we're happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, exactly. Woody?
Can I just say this before we sign off? As much as there are some teams in the National Hockey League that are down to their third string goalie and would perhaps prefer not to be down to their third string goalie in the playoffs right now, I am so happy to have our first string goalie to make us 3 goalies and 2 nets. Darren, it's so good to have you back this week, buddy. We're better with 3 of us. I was going to say threesome there, but that doesn't really work. It's better when there's 3 of us here. So thanks, buddy.
I'm the E-bug.
It's so good to have you back and see and have you feeling better.
I was going to say it's like riding a bike, but that's not a good analogy.
No, definitely,
It's actually easier.
definitely not a good. Now that I'm seeing that how much like you're bored and you're playing with your gear and you're cleaning your axis and you're cleaning and you're rebaking your glove. We shouldn't have InGoal shouldn't have sent you flowers and T-shirts. We should have sent you a new set of gear. We might have to work on that with our friends from CCM.
The InGoal flowers were beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I feel like I should get them done as my custom print on my pads moving forward.
I'd like to see that.
The InGoal flowers. You guys are awesome.
Hey, listen, not a lot of people know this, but I happen to be married to our CFO. And the company in Vegas that did the flowers was called Whispers and Honey. And so when your wife checks your Visa statements at the end of a month on the company card, and there's just something in Vegas called Whispers and Honey, you get a note that says, WTF is this? And I'm like, flowers for Darren, relax, flowers for Darren. It was a good moment.
That's a perfect way to end it. Great being back with you guys and you, the listener, as well. And we'll chat next week a little bit more on the cat eye, I'm sure, as we will be closing in on the end of round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs on InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com, source for sports Surrey, and our feature interview presented by Sense Arena VR.